With me, Mandy Rose-Morgan. Mandy is one of the interesting people I've met during freedom rallies. Um, I realized one thing when this whole scamdemic started that mainstream media they become weapon of propaganda, and one scary thing that they do is as propaganda machines, they aim to dehumanize its opponents. So whoever oppose the oppressive regime automatically become a target. So propaganda aim to dehumanize people. That's why we got all this labeling and name calling, like using terms anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists. It is to dismiss any discussion and to belittle people who oppose people in charge of propaganda. So it is very important to introduce people who are attending freedom rallies and speak to normal people who are there, who dare to make a stance and to fight for our human freedoms. So welcome, Mandy. If you can
Thank
introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, you've just done a pretty good job of that. Mandy Rose-Morgan. Yep, I've attended quite a few rallies. As you say, I was arrested, and quite rightly, what you say also, they do their absolute best to discredit and demonize people like myself who are standing up fighting for our rights. People like me have never said that there wasn't a COVID virus, and we're not anti-vaxxers either. We're just simply um, aware of the fact that this is about very much more than our health, and it's really about an encroaching sort of technocratic tyranny which is overtaking society, um, and presents a very great peril for mankind, for humanity in general. And it's approaching very, very fast, warp speed, as they like to say. I believe Biden used that term, the warp speed thing for the rolling out the vaccine. In 18 months, we've seen people basically voluntarily surrendering their freedom, masking themselves up, distancing themselves from their friends and neighbours, allowing themselves to be separated from their family, to the extent that we've seen people, um, not allowed to bury their dead, their loved ones, not allowed to visit them when they're in hospital. And of course, and then there's those that never even made it to hospital because the NHS has virtually collapsed. All of this is what people like myself have taken to the streets to protest. It's not just, we don't believe there's a virus and we're all anti-vaxxers. What we're standing up for is our rights, and for clearly what is the deliberate destruction of our society. That's what we're protesting. We were never consulted about this. This is just something that a group of globalist elites who purely self-interested and solipsistic, and consider themselves to be utterly superior to the rest of us, have decided is best for the rest of us, and it's clearly not. And yeah, that's what we're about.
Let's turn clock
Would
back
you like me to?
to let's turn clock back to March 20 when it all started. Where were you? What you were doing at the time? How this thing unfolded in your perspective? What made you
Okay.
to make a stance? Like, what was your transition between what was being
Well,
fed to us in mainstream media and to your to your clarity and to your decision to attend freedom rallies? How what's your story?
so back in March 2020, I was training to be a personal trainer. Um, as you said in the intro, I'm a musician, a songwriter, and in the grand tradition of songwriters, all my favourite musicians have always been somewhat rebellious. And I guess that's something that's kind of in you. I've never really been trusting of the establishment. I've always been a little anti-establishment, working for the man and all that kind of thing. What really sort of tweaked my antenna at the time was that we were hearing so much about this virus coming out of Wuhan in China, and then suddenly we were taking advice from China on how to deal with things, and these kind of draconian policies that they were implementing. And something in me was just really suspicious of this from the get-go. And then over the ensuing weeks, I don't know. I really don't know what made me aware. It was just something really in my nature. I just was very distrustful of the whole thing. And then when everything started to shut down, they did impose the lockdown. There was a piece of information that was leaked, actually. I suppose that probably cemented it. Was from Neil Ferguson, who had said something like, I think this came out at the time, but I remember when I heard it, it was like all my fears were absolutely realized in that moment. Neil Ferguson had said that they didn't think they could implement such policies in Europe. We would never go for it. Then they saw them do it in Italy and they thought, oh, we can do it. And the next thing you know, of course, they are doing it. And it just straight away, I know what's going on here. I had this kind of inner feeling, this sort of intuitive feeling that something much bigger. Well, I'd seen Brexit for a start, and I'd seen a lot of this sort of stuff to go with the climate change movement and everything which had been happening. And immediately it became apparent to me that a lot of the same agenda was being realized under the auspices of this COVID pandemic. The same things were being realized, and sure enough, after a little while, it you had a lot of the sort of climate change activists coming out saying, oh, isn't it wonderful, the lockdown has been really great for us, that the air's been cleaner, that you can hear the birds sing, the skies are clearer, you can breathe fresh air, which was ironic considering that the next thing they would do is put on a mask and limit their access to fresh air. But it was the same thing. I could see the same thing happening, and immediately the same kind of tactics that you've seen. If you don't follow this, then you're a bad person. This kind of instant labeling, like just as the people that voted for Brexit, were bad people. They were uneducated people. They were stupid people, ignorant people. And I just saw a lot of the same tactics being used, and I thought, this is the same thing, but under a different guise, and I was just really suspicious of it. And as I say, immediately following China, taking a lead from China, one of the strictest, most draconian communist societies on earth, I didn't trust that for a moment. And then there was, of course, the closing down, the shutting down of the economy, as well as locking people up with the first lockdown and stuff like that. It all seemed to me, instantly I kind of knew what direction we were going in, and it was terrifying. It's frightening, because this is something about which it seems like they would have us believe we have no control. That's also why we went out and protested in the first place, because people like myself were saying, well, actually, do you know what? We do, and we're not going to just accept this and take it lying down. We're going to go out there and show you our mettle, show you what we're worth. And we're not just going to kowtow to some group of, unelected sort of puppet masters, if you like, who are pulling the strings and telling us that this is the future and we have no choice. We do have a choice, and we are going to have some say in this, and we're going to do our best to stop it
So
happening.
how this started for you? How did you find out about rallies? How did you get the message? How did you separate it, information from propaganda narrative?
Well, I've always been a fairly voracious reader, so I instantly started reading lots of things. I had a few friends that had been talking to me. Some of these friends actually had talked to me for years. A close girlfriend of mine, Dee, she had been very vocal about a imminent police state. She'd been talking about that for easily a decade. And then there's a friend of mine called Greg, who was instrumental in my kind of awakening, if you like. He also had been aware of these kind of things for a good 10-15 years before me, before I really came on board. But to be honest with you, I mean, although I wasn't fully on board with the whole thing for a long time, I had never trusted the establishment. You know, they have this track record of lying to us. There's so many things we can immediately allude to, like the Iraq War, you know, the weapons of mass destruction. I won't go into it too much now, but there's an awful lot of extremely suspicious circumstances surrounding 9/11. And things like that. It's just, you know, nothing's ever, it seems, as it seems, as the mainstream media would have us believe. And I was just always very suspicious of that. And I did my research. I went back and chatted to some of these friends, and it quickly became apparent to me that actually some of the things that certain people have been saying for a long time, like David Icke, a man who's, you know, universally panned and discredited, actually was on the money. The man was on the money, and I just thought, and I couldn't dismiss, even if I wanted to, and I didn't, but even if I had wanted to, I couldn't dismiss these things as conspiracy theories when people had spoken up so eloquently about what was happening in the world, and then it was clearly manifesting right in front of our eyes. You know, it became quickly apparent that COVID wasn't the existential disaster that we were being told it was. And immediately that they started to impose these kind of restrictions upon us, you know, it wasn't just me. I mean, there was other people. There was I forget his name now, but a guy who was on talk radio an awful lot at the beginning, though he did eventually comply and went and got vaccinated, which I never really understood. But he spoke very eloquently at the time of just the absolute disastrous nature of these restrictions that were being imposed, what it would do to the economy, what it would do to people's lifestyles, and everything else. And I could see that myself. And then I that's when I started to get active, you know, and I rang up Talk Radio, and I went on there, and of course I was going to say famously, it's not really famously, but a few people did actually hear that interview. I spoke to Richard Madeley, and he asked me what I thought was going on, and I said, I think the government are destroying the economy deliberately. And that was it. I was axed, and they never took a phone call from me again. But immediately upon me saying that and calling into that show, I had a lot of people contact me on Facebook, and so the network, I sort of became then, I became privy to a whole wider, you know, group of people who were really switched on, who were organising these rallies and things like that, who said, you know, come along, get involved. And so I did, and I haven't looked back, because I firmly believe in the cause. This is a humanitarian crisis. We are talking about the future of humanity here. This is not just about COVID. This is not about getting out of this, overcoming this pandemic and returning to normality. That's never going to happen. This is about a totalitarian, technocratic takeover that's being implemented by a group of globalist elites who consider themselves better than the rest of us and are in a position, due to their wealth and power and influence, to so far, you know, organize this change, which, if we continue to comply with, will be effective. But if people do realize that actually, you know, it's not as bad as they think it is, and that they are in fact able to do something, won't happen. It will be impossible for them to realize. So, which is why, you know, chatting to your good self this evening, I'm doing that, and I will be out again protesting and stuff, because we have to. You know, we are the, as they said on the rallies. I met some interesting people on the rallies. Oh, what's his name from Stand Up X? I forget. Lovely guy. And he's always saying it. We are 98%. That's what we are, and it's all about numbers. You know, we have the numbers, and we can resist this. We are the resistance.
Just yesterday, I was listening to interesting audiobook, and I would say quite worrying audiobook. It was titled, and you can find this on YouTube, Nietzsche and Nazis, Nazi
Okay.
Germans. It was about 3 hour long. I was listening this during um, work, and basically, when author was breaking down how Nazis came to power, because they came to power in democratic way, they were using health crisis as a excuse to
Mm,
implement certain changes, like labeling
yeah.
people, like coming out with those theories like racial theory, then calling people disease spreaders and dehumanizing opponents. So the public health, become a tool of propaganda, and
Yeah.
it was so shocking for me because this was literally, I could say, one-to-one pattern to what we can see happening today. That was so worrying, and it's like lack of public awareness, understanding what is going on. People are thinking we've got
Yeah.
genuine natural disaster, which isn't. And
Mm.
what do you think? Because we know the history, we know what happened in Germany, and we are seeing similar hypnosis. What do you think is happening with people?
Well, I think it's very interesting that you bring that up. There's a lot of links actually between the organisations that are involved in what's happening today that actually do go back to Nazi Germany and connected with eugenics and all sorts of things. I won't go off on too much of a tangent because I mean this evening I really wanted to give the best possible overview of what's happening. But absolutely, you're right. This is all being done. Apparently for our own good, that's the catch-all kind of phrase. This is for your own good, this is in your best interest, and that's what they've convinced people of, that we're acting in your best interest, for your benefit and for your health, and anybody who doesn't comply is selfish and doesn't care about other people's health. I mean, that's the label that they're trying to stick on people. And yes, Nancy Edwards, you're quite right, there is no climate change. I just wanted to respond to that because I saw that come up a few minutes ago. Um, it's exactly the same kind of propaganda. The only difference really is that these people wielding and using this propaganda have so much more power now because they have technology, much more powerful technology, and it's all pervasive. It's everywhere. People are inundated with these messages on your whatever device you might have, wherever you go. It's all around you. The government are spending over £1 billion, as far as I understand it, on promulgating this one particular message. This is for your health. People are going to die unless you comply, unless you do as we. And actually, quite the reverse is true. Um, Really, I don't want to. I don't know how much I can say without having us taken off the air. But the answer to all of this, we all know what the answer is. Step right up and get yours. That is what's killing people. That is now killing people at an alarming rate. The latest thing I've read, I mean, there's been 15,000 acknowledged in the United States, something like 30,000 acknowledged deaths in Europe. There's at least 16, approaching 1,700 in this country. I mean, the argument that this is for your health, for your benefit, really is laughable. It's absolutely laughable, and I don't actually know how they're still managing to get away with it, because frankly, it's preposterous. There's no argument for children to be treated at all. They are pretty much immune to this virus. The antidote, let's call it the antidote to the virus, is actually far more dangerous to them than COVID ever would be. The latest statistics are alarming as well. Apparently, and this is from the CDC and the FDA, people in that demographic 65 and above, and let's remember that that's the most vulnerable demographic. That's what this all started over. It was like, we must protect the elderly. That's how this was presented to us a year and a half ago. They are now dying 5 times higher rate having received the antidote than they are of the virus. That's from the CDC and the FDA. I read that only yesterday. With regard to teenagers, in the last couple of months since the rollout for teenagers in this country, there has been a 50%, maybe 56, 57% increase in death amongst teenagers. And those teenagers that do suffer from pericarditis and myocarditis, although they may well recover from that in the short term, there is an elevated risk of them dying, which is thought to be about approximately 50% over the next 10 years as well. When you then add the fact that the antidote, we can get away with saying antidote, does not prevent infection or transmission, where are we? The whole thing really starts to collapse, and it is ridiculous. So this is the information that we need to get out to people. It is not working. Every single public health intervention that they've taken has failed. What's the word I'm looking for? It's been a complete failure. The social distancing, the lockdowns, there's been no significant difference or effect from any of those measures. And there's been no significant effect from the antidote, save the creation of variants, which all sprang up after the advent of the antidote. So I mean, clearly it's not working. Nothing is working. The only thing that would ever have worked is common sense. The measures that have been historically proven and tried and tested, tried and true, as they say, over the years. If you're not well, stay home. If you meet people that aren't well, obviously stay away from them. Look after yourself. Plenty of sunlight, fresh air, vitamin D, orange juice, all of those kind of things. Just look after your health, stay fit, eat well. These are the things. There is a virus. I'm not denying that there is a virus, and by all accounts, it seems to have got worse since the introduction of the antidote. So yeah, it's just that the argument that this is for your health, that I'm getting back to your original question, to save people, to save your grandma and everything like that, it's not only irresponsible, it's reprehensible, it's immoral, and I'm tempted to say it's downright evil, because people have lost their lives. People have slumped into depression, into despair, into alcoholism, into drug abuse, into all sorts of problematic areas since they lost their jobs, since, as I said earlier on, people in their family, close relatives have died and they've not been able to bury them properly, not been able to attend funerals, not been able to visit loved ones in hospitals, not been able to receive treatment in hospitals. The overall effect of our own government's measures to supposedly protect our health and look after us has been an unmitigated disaster. And if I can see that, and anybody, I suspect everybody watching this right now can also see that, you can bet your bottom dollar our governments can see it. They know it. They know it for a fact, and they knew it from the offset. They will have conducted some form of cost benefit analysis at some point or another. They will have known the outcome. That's their job. That's what they should know and should be weighing up before they implement these measures. And they will have done it, and they then have gone ahead and done it anyway. They have destroyed the economy. They have destroyed the NHS. They have destroyed children's education. They, the very people who are telling us to trust them because they're acting in our best interest for our own good to protect our health, have destroyed the livelihoods of 500 million people around the world. They have put 150 million people into abject poverty and starvation. Many of those are children. This is what they have done. This has been their policy. And all the time that they're doing this, they're telling us we're going to build back better. You know, this is going to be the new world order. This is going to be the new world, the great reset. Well, it's hell. They are creating hell on earth, and they are destroying everything in their path. And I mean everything that presents anything that even resembles an obstacle to what they want to achieve. They are going out of their way to destroy. And that's not just our health, our physical health, it's our psychological health. They have attacked us with psychological warfare. They have attacked our culture, our customs, our tradition. They have, I mean, there's so many threads to this. It's and they seem disparate, but actually they all do connect. It's been an unmitigated onslaught on the everyday common people, everything about us, and it's been to atomize us. That's been the intention all along, to separate us, to polarize us politically, to do with COVID, to do with religion, to do with culture, to do with everything. I don't want to go too far off track because I want to stay with this, but that has been the effect, and the overall, that has been their drive, their goal, and the overall effect of that has been to create communities, countries full of people that are confused, that no longer know, they don't know whether they're coming or going. A lot of people, they're very confused about their really about the state of the world, what they should be doing with regards to COVID. Of course, that they feel like that this is almost apocalyptic in its proportion, and they're not sure about their identity anymore. Their cultural roots. There's been conflicts sown with so many of the other riots and things, protests that have gone on simultaneously along with this, like the BLM riots, and now we're seeing the riots to do with Insulate Britain, which is more climate change
I'll stop
nonsense.
you for a second. It's hard to tell that this is riots when we got like 8 people
I should
or
have said
less
protests.
sitting on the street, and then police doing nothing. Well, you've seen what was happening during freedom rallies, how they manhandled elderly, how they manhandled women, how they brutally beaten members of the public.
Yes,
And
yeah,
so definitely, it just shows where what is allowed, what isn't. So freedom protest isn't allowed, but any
that's right. Yeah.
political rallies or protests, they will be approved.
Yes, no, you're right to stop me. Riots was the wrong word, but yes, it's the way people are being manipulated, and you're exactly right when you point that out. The police's attitude to certain protests has been one of benevolence and great generosity. Let's make these people a cup of tea and make sure that they're comfortable. Let's take the knee in solidarity with this other group of people. But if you're standing up for your civil rights and you're frightened about the direction that the country's heading in, and the fact that you're losing your job and things like that as a response to a mediocre upper respiratory virus, you get beaten up. And a personal anecdote: one of the rallies I went on, I think it was the second or third one. The first couple, Trafalgar Square. We met in Trafalgar Square and stuff like that, and they really had this atmosphere of almost being like a festival. People were hugging each other. We were here. We were united for freedom. It was really kind of a loving kind of atmosphere, something like one would imagine the 60s festivals were. It really had that kind of feeling about it. It was very, very warm, and it was good to be a part of. By the time I went along to the third one, I arrived at Marble Arch Station, and before I'd even crossed the road to Hyde Park, I'd seen 3 people taken down in the most brutal manner by the police and thrown to the concrete. They didn't put up a fight. They did nothing. They were simply there to protest their rights, which they have every right to do. But this is why we must carry on this, because now, of course, as a response to that, and as a response to these sitting down protests that you're talking about, new legislation is coming in regarding protests and just what we can and can't do. You've got so many things, as I said, there's so many diverse threads, and I'm glad that you stopped me when you did, because I will go off on a tangent. I really will. But there's so many that the government, these agents of control, are coming in from every direction. The internet, of course, and on the street. The first thing, how I really wanted to start this conversation, was I wanted to make it clear, certainly from my perspective, and I'm sure, I hope other people will agree with me, is that this is very much a class war. This is the upper echelons, the establishment, who for too long have had it easy and have sort of ruled over us without really coming under too much scrutiny. Over the last few decades, 20, 30 years, especially since the growth of the internet over the last couple of decades, the man on the street, the common people, the working class, if you like, have become more and more aware of what these people in positions of power are all about, and some of the shady sort of chicanery that they get up to behind the scenes. And of course, they don't want us knowing that. And this is something that they want to stamp out for good, and they've therefore deemed it necessary to subjugate us entirely, bring us completely under control, bring us to heel, if you like, and bring the boot down firmly upon us and keep us all in our place. And that's what's going on with the protests. That's why you can't protest. That's why they're so brutal with us. That's why when we do protest, it's not reflected in the media. The mainstream media do not pick it up. And that's why the things like the online harms bill are being introduced. They are coming in from every angle to stamp us down, to keep us in our place, to keep the lowly people where they belong, and not allow us to get any ideas above our station, which is what I think they think we have, ideas above our station. These people
Uh,
are so. Do you want to come in there?
yes, I would agree. It seems like everything is random, but once you see the pattern, you realize that this is just a mass of individual, deliberate action, and like every area is covered.
Yeah.
Um, I know just for a fact, I happen to be Polish, and we had a history of overthrowing communistic regime. And what happened? We, I mean, as a society, Polish people, they gathered in churches. So that was the place where really religion and churches, they were the places where people could gather and strengthen themselves, and they repel the regime that way.
Mm.
And like when this pandemic started, I'm not afraid to use this. I will forever refer to this as a
It's quite
scamdemic.
right. That's exactly what it is.
And I noticed it that they just picked on every lesson in history. So they didn't miss the areas. So like we're having Great Friday, one of the major celebration during the Easter, and there was a intervention of police in church in London. They just stopped church service on that day. And I don't just mean that this is national thing. You can tell in every country the religious gathering and a spiritual congregation were stopped. So any chance for people to gather were removed by proxy.
Yeah.
So they pick up the lesson. That's where we messed up last time in the history, and now we're improving. We're not gonna get punched from the same angle again. That's how I see it.
Well, you're right. This is consummate. It's a comprehensive attack on everything, and it's so good that you mentioned the churches, because of course I mentioned Christianity earlier. There has been a systemic attack on Christianity, um, the world over, really. It's because it's a binding force that unites people, and that's what's come under attack so much in the last few years. Anything that resembles social cohesion, anything that ties people together, bonds people together in a way that they might actually present a genuine obstacle to this, this machine, this relentless machine that's trying to grind us all into the dirt. Anything that presents an obstacle to that needs to be destroyed. And so things like going to church, Christianity, which is the biggest religion in Europe, has just come under so much attack. All these churches that we've seen that have been desecrated and burned and destroyed in, certainly in France. I mean, they've had a massive number of churches have been destroyed out there. In this country too, we've had people attacking the church. Wearing symbols of Jesus, of Christ. We've seen parishioners and priests and stuff like that attacked arrested in the street for preaching the word of God. Anything that presents, because religion has come under such an attack, and people often do refer to our society as a secular society. And there's a something here that I just want to touch on slightly, because I feel that where a kind of a void has opened up, where religion has come under so much attack in recent years, to fill that void, you have things like climate change, which is taken on a kind of almost religious, zealous, religiosity over the last few years. People are obsessed; they're fanatical about it, and this is what they're doing. This kind of this harnessing of all the minorities. Which in some ways, a lot of people will be thinking, oh, that's great. It's all about inclusivity and equality and everything like that. But it's actually not. It has a real sinister angle to it. And that angle is, well, let's harness all the minorities. Let's elevate the minorities above the majority to break down the majority. And that's what they're doing. And everything that the majority stands for that holds them together, including things like the nuclear family, these things have all come under attack recently, and it's basically anything that holds us together. So people can't present a united front to what is going on. And as I say, we're talking far broader now than just COVID. We're talking about the criminalization of speech. You can't say certain things. People are being censored. There's somebody wrote on there that they'd posted something on Facebook and were banned for 18 days. This, the big tech companies that are taking over everything and dictating to you what you can and can't say. This is what we're protesting about. Freedom of speech, freedom to believe what we want to believe, to see our friends, to gather in the streets, freedom of movement. It's not just about we're anti-vaxxers or we don't believe in COVID, because that's clearly not true with the majority of people that I've met on the street. The majority of people I've met on the street were well-balanced individuals, just with a good sense of what was going on. And they all know that this is about so much more than COVID. This is about a real clamping down on everything about us, everything that we can do, you know, restricting us from doing everything. It is about control. That's the word. I'm sure lots of people are sitting there watching right now saying that in their living rooms. It's about control. It's about control of everything, absolutely everything. And they're just, COVID is just a conduit or a Trojan horse, if you like, to do that. Because the minute something comes along that seems to present a threat to people's health, and they can jump on that and say, this is to protect you, it's for your own good, which brings us back to what you said earlier. It's almost like, how can you argue with that? You're in a position where, well, how can I argue with something that's ostensibly about protecting people's health? I mean, what kind of person am I? You know, I don't want to compromise your health any more than I'm sure you want to compromise mine. So as soon as it takes on that kind of appearance to people, it's about protecting people's health. They don't have a leg to stand on. But this is always the way, you know, throughout this, since this has happened, it's been like, you know, oh, don't you care about your grandma? If you voted Brexit, you were instantly deemed to be a bigot or a racist, which was not the case. Just about everybody I know that voted Brexit because they didn't want to be ruled over by a group of unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats in Brussels. That's what they were saying no to. It wasn't freedom of movement or people. They weren't against people, you know, traveling around or anything like
That's
that. They weren't.
actually irony because Brexit, and I'm a foreigner, and I agree to concept of Brexit when initially I was thinking that this is like racist attitude towards others, or as
Mm,
people like me. But when I engage in discussion, I agree to this concept. Yes, I respected democratic decision. But I remember there was a constructive debate. There was a really fierce debate, to be honest.
mm,
And we got none of that now. And balanced people that I perceived as, I would say, role models, and I like authorities in their fields, like people in business and
mm.
um, politics who were stating their opinion, and basically that was democratic process. Yeah, what happened
Absolutely.
during
Yeah.
Brexit, and I truly respected that. While at the beginning I was thinking, you know, that this is just an attack on people like me, but I realize what is going on, and now we've come to such a strange irony when we are saying that all Brexit was to not to be ruled by unelected people, but then we've got like situation which is tenfold times worse because we got
Exactly.
completely unaccounted technocrats who are
Yeah.
just sticking their fingers into the pie, into the system,
Yep.
and they just want to turn everything upside down. So that's
Mhm.
the whole irony of this situation, where you had such a high level of engagement, everybody talking about this, people talking
Yeah.
to each other, discussing, and then like, you know, making sure it wasn't just a mistake to have this referendum. And
Mm.
then in democratic process, certain historical fact happen, and now we've came to this.
Yeah. I mean, Brexit. It was a distraction in many ways from what's really going on, but it was also an intrinsic part of what's going on because Brexit is a fundamental part of the globalist worldview. You know that's the EU is a globalist notion that connects with the UN and the WHO and all of these other global institutions. They're all parts of the jigsaw. They all fit together. This is why it was so important for the UK to stay in Brexit, because that was the plan. It was the plan for all of this to happen and for it to all unfold the way the technocrats imagined that it would do. That's also why Trump had to go, because Trump stood for something else. Trump wasn't on board with globalism. Whatever your feelings may be about Trump, whether you like him or not, he wasn't really a globalist, and he
Now
had to go.
there's a strange thing about Trump because he turned out now to be um, we want to avoid V word. He is now medical product seller. He become
Mm,
uh, Uncle V. Uh,
yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, I don't really know quite what to make of him. All I can say is really with any certainty is that he wasn't the right fit. They wanted Biden because Biden was going to be just a puppet. Biden is just a shill for the globalists. That's all he is. I mean, clearly the man doesn't know where he is. He's in cognitive decline. That's very apparent. Has been apparent for a long time now. And frankly, I think it's absurd, this notion that more people than ever voted for him to be president. And I think that's actually, that narrative is falling apart now. So much of what the globalists have, um, told us through the media is actually starting to collapse. I mean, that's been come under attack. Even people like Rod Liddell recently, who's a Daily Mail columnist, who hates Trump. I know he hates him. Even he's saying the election's not what it appeared to be. I won't say too much because I don't want to get your channel taken down. But even he's saying that that election is definitely suspect. It's not what it appears to be, and neither is anything else. Just behind just about everything that's out there at the moment is an ulterior agenda. There's something else going on. The LGBT movement, which is becoming more and more a fundamental part of this. It's all about the inclusivity and equality, and in this the Great Reset, building back better, and everything else. As I said before, you rubber stamp it with a rainbow coloured flag, and everything seems, oh, that must be good. It has to be a good sign. It's all unicorns and rainbows and everything else like that. But it's actually a thinly veiled attack on the nuclear family. That's what they're seeking to destroy. Which again, as you look at these things in isolation, but when you see them all together, there's a pattern. The nuclear family presents an obstacle, so it has to be destroyed. Anything that binds people together, that presents a form of social cohesion, has come under attack. And so we're just down to individuals. That's all we have left, individuals, but individuals that ultimately, if their agenda goes ahead, will be exactly the same. There'll be, I don't want to get too fine a point. I don't want to get dragged into a racist kind of argument, but ultimately that will be the agenda. It will be to create a human race which is exactly the same. Everybody homogenous across the board, same color, same sex. Do you know the AMA, the American Medical Association, are moving now to actually get rid of the idea of gender being stamped on birth certificates entirely, get rid of it entirely. So there's no such thing as gender. So what we are looking at in the long term, and I say long term, this is, happening right now, and I don't know how quickly it will be realized, is a homogenous race of people who are sufficiently dumbed down. If the mainstream media has its way, and they continue to speak to us like children, which is what they do all the time, sufficiently confused that they don't know where to turn. So in the end, they look to the state for advice, and increasingly a lot of people are doing that, and completely sexless. A race of people, a generation of people who think that there's no such thing as male and female. There's no such thing as there'll be no religion, as I've already commented on earlier. That will disappear. The new religion will be basically this kind of like, we must save the planet, we must save each other, we must do whatever the state tells us. And you'll just have a group of people, a race of people, which are like drones, essentially, doing what the state tells them to do, with no sense of national identity, no religious kind of affiliation, no roots to anything, no connection to anything anymore. because that will have all been taken away from them. And to even allude to those things will be verboten. You won't be able to talk about them. You won't be able to say anything, and that's what's happening. As I say, what we're seeing on online with big tech and these companies. You can't say certain things. Increasingly, freedom of thought, as much as freedom of speech, is being criminalized. And that, I know that may sound extreme and it may sound a bit far out to some of our viewers right now, but believe me, this is where they're going. Once we go past the pandemic and we go through the climate, because we will have climate change lockdowns. They will come after the pandemic lockdowns. It will, the agenda will move on. And then you'll get to a point where you have people like Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum and things like that, and the Wellcome Trust will come into view, and the agenda will really begin to emerge. Because this isn't the agenda we're seeing at the moment. This is just part of it. These are just baby steps almost into it. And the full agenda is, as I said, a completely homogenous race who are absolutely programmed by the elites to behave and live in a certain way, probably in a certain area. As we move towards a cashless society, which is obviously almost seems like totally ineluctable at the moment, you will be controlled on what you can spend, where you can spend it, how much you can spend. All of this will happen. And then as we move further and further, so you will have your COVID passport, which will include all your health information, your banking details, a criminal record, if you have a criminal record. Everything about your life will be on this passport, which initially will be on your phone. But as time goes on, will probably end up in a chip. Probably will be. That's where they want it to go. People like Klaus Schwab want to microchip people. He would like to put a chip in your brain to monitor your thoughts. So all of what I've said earlier, it may sound a bit out there, but actually these things are on the agenda. They are stated goals of things like the World Economic Forum and the Wellcome Trust. This kind of merging of man and machine, and this idea, the transhumanist agenda, which some of your viewers may be aware of. That's where we're going. And the Elon Musk is already doing this. Yes, absolutely, he is. Alpha Omega. That's quite right. This is where we're going. And COVID is, as I say, it's just a Trojan horse. It's just led us in. They've been very honest about it. I mean, to their credit, all of these globalists came out at the very beginning and said, COVID has given us an opportunity to advance certain agendas which we thought would take years to accomplish. So it's not like they've lied. They've said it. And in fact, most of what I'm saying, you can look up. You can actually access it online if you can be bothered to read it, because it's normally in, absolute reams of paperwork that take you hours to get through. But it's there in black and white, the stated aims and goals of these people, to create this. Go on, sorry.
Talking about programming, Mandy. So how did you break yours? How it happened that you've came to this ability to have a insight in what is going on, into breaking the conditioning. I think this is important to understand, because many people who relate, they feel lonely. That's the reason why I'm doing this conversation, because by interviewing people like yourself, first of all, it is fighting the propaganda, showing the real people, showing their feelings, showing their thought process, their goals, and then people can resonate better. Because if we just focus on their narratives, we forget about ourselves. And I think it's more important for us to reverse this, to restore the human society, not to go in their agenda, because we can talk for next 100 years about their agenda. What will turn this around, I think, is to I would call this process new renaissance for humanity. Because again, they want to reset this their way, but okay, we know that
Yes.
we're not going back to what we used to know. So why don't we use this opportunity for, let's say, humane renaissance? So everybody got different outlook on this, everybody got different opinion, and in the end, everybody got different agenda. I started this journalist activity to counter the propaganda, to show what I see, because I only see certain fraction of reality. So this is also my perception, my lens on the reality. But then one of the very reasons why I did this was because the propaganda aims to dehumanize you, me, everybody, everybody who not comply with the system. And if they are so fierce about this, I think that's what we should focus on, because if we restore the humanity, if we restore the society, then that's where the power is. That's what they're afraid. That's why they're attacking so fiercely. So, starting up,
Yes. Yeah.
what made
Okay.
you to you?
Right.
How did you came to critical thinking in your life, so people can resonate with you? Because we need to turn the focus away from what they want.
Yes.
We need to turn focus on us, on humans, to
Okay. Right.
bring humane scenario, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to answer all of those questions. I'm going to do one at a time in a slightly different order. Firstly, with the reset, it just triggered a little train of thought in my mind, and I have to state this very clearly for people talking about this. The man machine, this kind of being linked up to things. There is such a thing as the Internet of Things. There is now such a thing as what they're calling the Internet of Bodies. Um, Now, all of this will be facilitated through a global grid. Now, this, I believe, will be the 5G grid. Um, Everyone will be linked up to that. That is what they want. That's the ultimate goal. That then creates, if you like, not just a grid, but an actual prison. And it will be done through these, oh, you can't see it in the picture, but smart devices, as I said, a COVID passport. That's where they're going with that. They want everybody on it. And that, I have to tell you all, is why we are now facing a fuel crisis. The fuel crisis is not real. It's engineered and manufactured every bit as much as the scandemic to get us out of, carbon emission cars, out of petrol driven fossil fuel vehicles. They want us in electric cars because electric cars, yes, absolutely, alpha. Electric cars are, trackable. They can monitor that. That's what that's about. I just wanted to put that out there because that's something that's happening right now with the fuel thing. It's a ruse. It's to get you out of petrol cars. They want you in electric vehicles. They want everything to do with fossil fuels out the window. That's why they're constantly going on about zero carbon, zero carbon. It's nonsense. The whole narrative is nonsense. These vehicles that they're building are more damaging to the earth than the ones they've already got. They use just as many resources and they're harder to dispose of. So that's absolutely rubbish. Yes, it is communism by the back door. We've got some good people watching us tonight. So that's what they want to do with that. That's why they're attacking that so fervently, to get us into the electric vehicles, like I say, because you can be monitored and tracked and controlled. How did I become the way I am? I think that was down to good parenting. Really, my mum was a voracious reader. She used to read a book a week. I remember as a child growing up, I would always see my mum had her nose in some sort of book or other. She would go and lay in the bath for an hour and read a novel. And I pretty much took after her. I sort of excelled at school in English and humanities. I went to university to do English and classics. Um, that's really my background. But do you know what? I never really liked the educational system. I didn't really fit in with that. I actually questioned a lot of things I was being to, and this was in the mid 90s. I was at university. I was at King's College in London. And even then, some of what's happening now was beginning beginning to manifest. Like I was forced to take certain modules about feminism, about minority rights and things like that. And I couldn't understand why. I was like, why do I need to study these things? I didn't really want to study them, but there was required reading. So even then there was an agenda afoot. And throughout the 90s, it really the pace quickened, and where you had Tony Blair in government, who wanted everybody to go to university. And his mantra at the time, back in the 90s, I don't know if all of our audience would be old enough to remember, or even English, of course, so they wouldn't be aware. But his mantra was education, education, education. He wanted everybody to receive this certain type of education, which, it's worth pointing out, was presided over by 90%, I believe, of left-wing activists. That's our education system in this country. And I think that still holds to this day. I think the most recent survey conducted on universities and colleges in this country concluded that about 90% of them were left-leaning progressives who all voted Remain. And that's a big part of this, because people referring to communism, these people naturally lean towards the idea of a big state, a large state controlling the people. And that feeds directly into the technocratic worldview of complete control. So the technocrats who sit above everybody, the globalist elites who sit above, one level at the top of the pyramid of power, if you like, immediately below them, in the media, the news media, and the education system and everything like that, you've got this group of left-leaning progressives who all totally buy into this idea of the big state and communism, essentially, which, although the technocrats aren't communists, essentially, their goal is the same: control, total control. And it's aided and abetted by these left-leaning progressives who fill our institutions, who are in our education system, in our news, and in our media, which is why it's been so easy in the last 18 months for the government to promulgate these ideas about COVID, and we must all do this and we must all do that, because these people are ready and waiting to do this for them. They're only too eager to do it. You in the States, when children started to go back to school, you actually had the Teachers Association out there petitioning the government to extend lockdowns and to keep the kids out of schools. Which brings us on to another thing, which I won't go into right now, but if we talk again, I would like to explore further with you, to do with the Wellcome Trust and what they call ed tech and distance learning and things like that. It's all a shift. Everything's being shifted out of the classroom, out of the workplace, into the home, and online. Everything. That's what all of this is leading towards. The whole thing. All of it's going to be online. All of it's going to be monitored constantly and controlled. They will close the schools down. Education is going. The school system is going. The NHS is going. It will be replaced by an app on your phone. You will not have doctors to go to. You will be sending your symptoms to an AI machine. That is where they want it all to go. These technocrats believe that actually everything can be controlled by technology. So what do we do to stop it? Because I've just whetted your appetite, hopefully, for what I would like to discuss at a later date in much greater detail, what I've just alluded to. What do we do to stop this? The first thing we do to stop this is stop spending money via your card. Stop using cards. Use only cash wherever possible. Wherever possible, leave your phone at home. Don't even take it out with you if you can. I know some people's entire lives are on their phone, and it's almost impossible for them to function without it. But at least you can, for the time being. Cash is king. Absolutely, Mr. Willow. Draw cash out of a machine, out of the ATM machine, and use it wherever you go. They are pushing this cashless society thing like there's no tomorrow. Seriously, they are going for it now. The 7 major central banks in the world have been aligned, on the same page with regard to this for, I don't know, well over a year now. When I went to my first or second protest, I ran into a YouTuber by the name of Maya Tusi. Who has it? I think he's been kicked off of YouTube now, actually, and he does. Oh no, I think he still does some platform, some videos, but they're short and very censored, very diluted. But I spoke to him, so that was a year and a half ago about this, because I was reading about this a year and a half ago, where the central banks were proposing this, the cashless society, and they were getting ready to do it right there and then, in much the same way as our governments have been planning the vaccine passports all along, even though they were telling us, oh, they're not thinking about it. They had already paid people to do it, and it was like, it's coming. The way out of it is, do not take the jab. Can I say jab? Do not get it. It's more harmful than it is good, as I said already. It's created the variants. The variants are actually getting stronger. Now, this is a point that people need to be aware of. When you have a new viral outbreak of any kind, normally, if it's left to its own devices, it naturally tends to dissipate after about 18 months. It becomes weaker, not stronger. That's what happens. So if we had never imposed all these restrictions, the chances are by now this virus would have, if not petered out, it would have become endemic, and it wouldn't be anything like the threat it's now threatening to be. But since they introduced the jab, they have created the variants which have actually made it stronger. The Delta variant does seem to be having a much worse effect on some people than the original strains of the virus. Which brings us to another point. The virus, the vaccine itself was designed to combat the original strain. It's not effective against the Delta one at all. I mean, there's argument that it was never really effective anyway, but it's not right. Okay, so somebody's just written in Leanne Luat. I hope I'm sure I pronounced your name wrong, and I'm so sorry for that. But I actually have a close friend who took the vaccine. She's a close friend, so I'd been telling her for the entire time, don't do it, don't do it. But she took it for her mum. And this is the thing, the guilt that's been placed on people's shoulders. Do it for your family, do it for someone else. Even that left-wing American talk show host, who actually I quite like, because he's left-wing, but he's fairly open-minded. He said he took it for the team. He took it for the team. And this is what I think a lot of people are doing, because this is the angle. This is the way the government are approaching this. Do this for others. If you don't, you're a bad person. I think a lot of people have done that. She is now battling leukemia. I've known her for 25 years, and I've never known her be ill. That woman had a cast iron constitution. She was never ill. She drank, she smoked, she had a good time. She was always fighting fit and ready for a party. She was always like that. She got vaccinated, and from the moment she got vaccinated, her health began to deteriorate. She was at home with headaches, terrible headaches.
Maybe if we can just replace word "v" with "treated,"
What did
because
I say? Did I say the wrong word? Let's go
yes,
back to Jap then, or
just
something. Sorry.
avoid. Maybe use
I
word
disavow. I
treatment.
disavow that word. Yes, I disavow that word. Okay, so yeah, the jab. Anyway, ever since she had that, her health has been in decline, and she was admitted to hospital. Her spleen was swollen. Which is I'm replying to Leanne.
On
How would you pronounce that?
on that, with your friend being treated with a product that we can't mention, did she acknowledge that her health deteriorate as a result of that? Did she
Yes,
understand?
she firmly believes that. And I recently, I mean, I've been reading about this for a couple of months now from certain doctors who are naturally being censored every time they say anything. But recently there was a video on YouTube, believe it or not, that actually managed to escape censorship so far. And a doctor had taken some, done some tests, some analysis of one of his patients, of their immune system prior to the jab and then post jab. And the difference was astonishing. It was absolutely astonishing. The white blood cells had gone through the roof. Certain white blood cells, I believe they're called glucocytes. I might be wrong with that. It's something that sounds very much like that. I'd really need to consult my notes, but I think they're called glucocytes. And their lymphocytes, even though I was a nurse, I didn't used to deal with this sort of thing on a day-to-day basis. The lymphocytes had dropped. Now, in with the lymphocytes, you have CD8 cells, and the CD8 cells are cells which are responsible for recognizing and combating cancer cells. And they get completely knocked out by the jab, completely knocked out. Now, there is a growing consensus amongst various doctors and stuff that this is actually happening, and that there are rising numbers now of cancer patients who are actually developing cancer as a result of that. It's not 100% conclusive yet, but there's a growing trend, a certain trend of thought in that direction. And as I say, you know, from personal experience, I had never known that girl really in all those years be under the weather, and she's just been feeling poorly the entire time for the last well, a few months actually. And then she got diagnosed with leukemia just a couple of weeks ago, and she's been in and out of hospital ever since.
You
And
you work you work as a nurse.
mhm.
So
Well, I did. I don't any longer. I did.
was that your education? What made you to go into this profession, and what also made you to quit?
Right. Well, see, now this is going to answer a couple of your questions in one go. Um, I was working. What was I doing originally? I can't even remember what I was doing. I was at university. I was at university. Right. So I was at university doing my degree. I did about a year.
As a nurse in medical
No, I
qualification?
was doing
No.
English and classics because I was thinking maybe I might be a teacher. That's what I was thinking at the time. I might come away from it all and be a teacher. Um, but I was involved in a car accident. I got hit by a car. I had a little 125 motorcycle at the time, which I absolutely adored. It was a Yamaha 125, an SR 125. It's like one of these custom easy rider kind of bikes. I'd always imagined myself as a kind of biker chick, and I was like, yeah, my leather jacket and all that on this bike. And I used to commute. I used to drive to London on my bike to go to study and at university. And then one day when I was coming home, a guy who had been drinking actually pulled out of a junction and drove straight into me. I went over the top of the car. I landed kind of quite awkwardly, and I injured my back. And I had to take about 3-4 months out of my degree course. This was in my, as I say, just about my first year. So the last sort of 3 or 4 months I missed. And I was doing English and classics, and that meant anybody who's done classics here, it means oh, it's Neil spelled backwards. Of course it is. Yeah. Is that Neil Paul then? Um, so yes, I took a year out. Well, actually, I just didn't go back. They said I could take some time out and then go back when I'd fully recovered. And in that time, I thought, I don't know, I had a complete change of heart, and I thought I'm going to go into nursing. And I just went. There was a job, a vacancy opened up near to me. It was local, and I just went for that. And I did that for 10 years, and then I did a couple of years psychiatric nursing. Um, I kind of, why did I leave? I was kind of forced out, um, unfairly dismissed actually. I was sacked. Yes, I was sacked, but it was an unfair dismissal, and I went back to an industrial tribunal, which I won. and I was given like £2,500 or something compensation and told to reapply for my job, and I was free to do that without prejudice. And I did reapply for my job, and I couldn't get back in for love nor money. I reapplied 3 times, and I even went along about 18 months later to an open day that they had, and I went up there. So I thought, I'll just try again one last time, and I had to sit this a literacy and numeracy test, which I got 100% on, and then I was given a job there and then that day. Then I came away, and I waited for my what they would call a starter pack you receive through the post. I waited for that to arrive, and it never arrived. So I kept calling the personnel department and saying, I should have had a starter pack by now. I was offered a job. I came along, attended the open day, blah, blah, blah. And I'd clearly been blackballed because nobody ever got back to me. And I never received a starter pack. So I never got a start date. And consequently, I never went back to work as a nurse. All sorts of things go on. But, that ties in with a lot of what you asked me. Why was I wise to this? Why do I think differently? Why am I a free thinker? I think, as I said, as I alluded to earlier, that came from my mum reading books, and she always encouraged me to think for myself, to have an open mind and to think for myself. And that was the greatest advice I think she could ever have given me, because that's what I've always done about everything. So when I said to you earlier, I had these 2 friends that were very much into the kind of what people used to call, well, I hope your mum gets a lot better, Neil. I hope she recovers. I'm just replying to somebody there. I think that was the best advice she could ever give me, because I never just took things at face value. And, I remember there were times when I was in hospital when I know I did the right thing by the patient, and yet I got reprimanded by the system for doing it. On several occasions, I acted out of turn. You can't do that, I was told. But what I did was right for the patient. And that, to that end, I have been really sympathetic to a lot of nurses in the NHS today who I know are being pressured and lent on by their superiors to do a certain thing. And incidentally, whilst I'm on this subject, I would just like to say how utterly ridiculous and shameful, again, is the policy that's being rolled out by people like Sajid Javid to all hospital workers and care workers to get jabbed or lose their job. I think that's absolutely appalling that he would say that. Those people have worked throughout this entire scamdemic, whatever you want to call it. They've worked hard and they have put themselves in harm's way with no jab, no prophylaxis, nothing to protect them. They've just done their job looking after other people. That's what they do. And because to a large extent, many of these people are really sincerely altruistic and they care about other people to that extent that they would risk their own health to do that. And in all likelihood, since they spent 18 months in the company of people who were very sick, they have contracted and overcome COVID. They have developed natural immunity. They have worked in close proximity with this illness for 18 months. It's very unlikely that they haven't done that. And they will have natural antibodies. And yet they're being told to get jabbed or they have no job. There is literally a tower of paperwork now from the CDC, the FDA, from the Public Health England, in the BMJ, in Nature, in Science, from the NIH in America, that all attest to the fact that natural immunity is far, far more effective than anything afforded to you by a medical intervention. Natural immunity is the way forward. And if we'd have stuck with that policy in the first place, as I said earlier, herd immunity, this thing probably would have petered out. And those people that had got it, remember, I'm sure everybody knows who's watching, there's less than 1% fatality to this illness. for most people. It really only gets serious as you get significantly older. Young people unaffected. The younger you get, the less effect it has. And when you get to teenagers and kids, it's having no effect on them whatsoever. Only when you're over 65, 70 years of age that you're likely to get seriously ill. And even those people, most of them, will recover. It's only people with underlying health issues that are really particularly being vulnerable to this. And then I'm going to go on a little bit because I hope people don't mind, but we must also remember that at the beginning of this crisis, it was the government's policy to send all those elderly people home from the hospitals into care homes, which resulted in the death in this country alone of 42,000 elderly people, which is a substantial amount of the entire amount of people that supposedly have succumbed to this illness. 42,000 right at the beginning of the crisis. And that was deemed an accident, an oversight. You know, this was not intentional. This was really, it was accidental. So Matt Hancock and people like him, his clique of friends, all assured us, oh, it was terrible. What didn't mean for that to happen? Yeah, it happened in the UK, it happened in several countries in Europe, and it happened in the majority of states in America. They all did the same thing. That is not an accident. And that, again, you know, having a nice conversation about why I'm a free thinker and my little potted history of my life there, we mustn't get too into it. We've got to remember where we are now. We have to stay focused on that. This is killing people. They have killed people, and they are continuing to kill people. They are completely ignoring the fact that natural immunity is far superior to anything, any form of medical intervention. I believe it's the NIH and the FDA in America. Some of them organizations and then magazines like Science and things like that have said that natural immunity is not only robust, it is lifelong. For some people, it's lifelong. For some people, this SARS-CoV-2, when it came along, they were immediately immune to it because they still had T and B cell immunity from the last kind of SARS outbreak back in 2000, upper respiratory illness in 2009. They still had T and B cells from then.
On that note, British Medical Journal
Mhm.
um, had an article clearly stating that political influence does not allow to openly discuss the immunity because any medical intervention or using the external substances, let's call them substances, is always secondary because this just aim to support the body and its ability to heal.
Right. Sorry,
So
I missed.
no, I said that British Medical Journal admitted that role of natural immunity, the discussion was suppressed by the politics.
Oh, sorry,
That's
suppressed.
that's
Yes,
what I read
yes.
in British
Yeah,
Medical Journal, and
absolutely.
they admitted this that
Mm.
they weren't allowed to discuss this. But if
No,
you will understand the mechanics of the human body, um, how do we survive as a species through all the history when we didn't have those products,
yes, exactly.
injectables,
Yeah.
pills, etc. Um, the natural body defenses, they were always superior, and then medicine just improved certain things. But again, this takes holistic approach of the understanding of what constitutes human health.
Well, this is the case, exactly as you say. You know, throughout history, that's what we've done. We've developed natural immunity to all sorts of things. And up until 18 months ago, this was a perfectly acceptable thing to talk about. It was accepted. But as with so many things now, um, the definition of so many things has changed. The definition of a pandemic was changed. Now the definition of immunity is changed. I mean, and quite literally, the definition of so many things in our lives are being changed all the time. You can't say this, you can't say that, you can't talk about these things. No, that's no longer okay. This is no longer okay. It's just par for the course now. You literally, we're standing on quicksand in effect every day, because you're never really sure what you can talk about, what you can't talk about, and what things actually are. I mean, our history is being rewritten on a daily basis. I won't go into that too much right now, but it is happening. This is what the globalists are doing, and it's, I think a lot of it's intentional. I think it creates confusion, and that kind of confusion creates uncertainty, which causes people to panic. And I think that's why I saw a clip the other day of 3 women in America who call themselves the Masketeers. Some of you may have seen them. They're from, as I say, a state in America, call themselves the Masketeers, and they're out there advocating, you know, that everybody wears masks all the time. They want their children to wear masks in schools and things like that. Now, again, there's reams and reams of paperwork which attest to the fact that masks don't work. Masks are useless. They're next to useless. That had no significant impact on the spread of the virus. They were introduced in this country, mandated in this country last summer, immediately after which, the numbers seem to spike. Because none of these restrictions have made any difference to the virus whatsoever. It's followed its own course, and the course that it's followed has been mirrored just about everywhere else, whether they had the same interventions as us or not, made no difference. So mask wearing is clearly, it's a waste of time. If people took the time to read the evidence and, you know, look at the studies, including the Denmark study, which pretty much conclusively proved that they were ineffective, they would know better. But I think what's happened, and again, it brings us back to that kind of, it's a similar thing. It's kind of this kind of, you know, religious kind of zeal that some people have got for certain things that has replaced their original affiliation to certain religions, and also the desire to take control of something that they feel they have no control over. And this is a kind of psychological phenomenon. You know, when you see, we often hear about a person who feels that their life is spiraling out of control, and so they start to diet crazily. They get obsessive about a diet, and it's, they lose tons and tons of weight, and then eventually they even end up making themselves ill. And people say, well, how did it get this far? How did you end up going from a healthy person to an anorexic person? And they say, I think it was the only thing I had any control over. The only thing I had control. People need to have control. Yes, they are, Sasha, exactly. It's conformity. You're absolutely right. But also people want to have some sort of control. So I think they've been given the masks, and they see that the world is spinning out of control. They have no anchor anymore. There's nothing that they're certain of, and it's just like, give me my mask, give me my mask, stay away from me. Do you know what I mean? And they get fanatical about it. And I think there's this kind of psychological kind of coping mechanism. It's like, I will wear my mask. This is what I will do. This is how I will take control of the situation. I will protect myself and everyone else. I'm being virtuous. You know, there's probably an element of that kind of virtue signaling going on. But I genuinely think, and this is why I'm reluctant to criticize these people, even though I think what they're doing is bananas. I think a lot of them are doing it because they really believe it's the right thing to do. They firmly believe they're doing the right thing. And you know, if somebody really believes they're doing the right thing, you can't really, it's hard to criticize them for it. But what we can do, and this answers one of your questions earlier, what can we do about this? Well, we can continue to talk about these things. We can have open and free conversations where we can hopefully raise people's awareness of many things. Like, for example, I was just talking about natural immunity. Do you know that you have got a more than 50% elevated risk of getting seriously ill if you take the medical intervention when you're already naturally immune? If you've already got antibodies in your system that you have got because you've had COVID and you've recovered from it, and then you are given the jab, you've got more than a 50% chance of getting seriously ill, an elevated risk of getting seriously ill because you already had natural immunity. These are things that
I'm
people
pretty
don't.
sure you've seen this famous headline that person with double intervention died, and doctor said, what would happen if that person wouldn't be treated?
Yeah,
So what worse could happen? Like this just shows the whole ridiculousness of this propaganda and the whole unscientific approach
yeah,
to all this. Because I wouldn't mind taking any sort of intervention if you would logically explain that to me. But there is no logic, there is no
no,
science, there is Soviet style propaganda, and the more you push, the more I repel. That's 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 how
and
I see it.
that's a perfectly natural reaction, isn't it? I mean, that's what happens. Any teenager, when parents start to tell their children you can't do this, what's the first thing the kids do? They want to do it. You know, presently, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, and if I did, forgive me for repeating it, but those in the high risk categories over 65, they have 5 times more risk now of dying from the intervention than, but it's not just a risk, they are dying 5 times more from the intervention than they are from COVID now. That's I read that just yesterday, something that was from the FDA. I've seen today or yesterday I saw there's a quite interesting group of people called Project Veritas. If any of you have not seen Project Veritas, check them out. Um, doing some really great sort of undercover work, and they actually interviewed 3 representatives from Pfizer. One of them was a CEO. I'm sure he was a CEO, but you can check it. I think the video is available on YouTube, actually, still. Three Project Veritas, 3 guys from Pfizer who all said natural immunity is better than what they can give you. It's insane that this is carried on as far as it has, which is why we have to talk about this, why we have to bring it out and just bring out the facts. And the facts are that this intervention doesn't prevent infection. It doesn't prevent transmission. In fact, in a recent study, many of these people working in a nice one, Neil. A lot of people working in Ho Chi Minh City, in a hospital in Ho Chi Minh City recently, were carrying a viral load. They're all double jabbed, remember, these nurses. This is a hospital, so they're all, these doctors and nurses, all double jabbed, excuse me, and they were carrying a viral load 250 times higher than their unvaccinated counterparts. 250 times higher. In fact,
Untreated.
than the untreated. Oh God, sorry. Yes, I disavow that. I disavow what I just said. The untreated. That's it. Okay, treated and untreated. I must remember that. I'm terrible. I get carried away. I'm so
I
passionate about
mean,
these things.
on one hand, this is also ridiculous. We're living in such absurd times. I would never have thought, and
Yeah,
it's just about, like you said, changing the definition of the words, confusing people. Because I wouldn't mind if we will have genuine discussion without beating around bushes and just say, okay, what can we do to, let's say, to reduce carbon footprint? What can we do?
yeah,
Sit down together as a civilization. How can we rewrite our ways as a society, as a humanity, as a species
mm,
on this planet? No problem. But if there would be involvement, but what is happening is just really Soviet style propaganda.
yeah,
We've just lunatics, they've taken over asylum. And literally it just reminds me this story by Hans Christian Andersen, Emperor Clothes.
yeah.
That like
I've
we're
alluded. Yeah,
living in a state of collective
yeah,
psychosis, where
Mhm.
nobody wants to speak openly, and
Yeah.
intelligent people that I really respected, like I would follow them in
Yeah.
areas of personal development, business, their professional background, and they're silent. They can't just
Mhm.
speak up and admit openly. So I've been called names. I've
Yeah.
I've seen my network of professional contacts just melting down like ice cap
Oh.
in in no time, just because I
Yeah.
dare to speak. And I made this mistake because I've become quite frustrated. So maybe I wasn't communicating at my best, but I've picked up on this, and I did the best I could, like by live streaming events and by talking to people. So live streaming from start to finish for as long as it
It's just the
took.
bottle.
No, no, I'm just saying live streaming from start to finish, all those events, so people can see the thing through lens of my phone, yeah, and they
Yeah.
can make their own judgment because in mainstream media they would only see violent clips and they
Yeah.
will hear the narrative. But like with me and other people who were providing their own footage, you could see yourself what really happened from different angle and draw your own conclusion.
Yeah.
And then, like when we started this conversation, I was really appalled that this dehumanization, um, this propaganda, I just recognize this from history. It just
Yeah.
sounds alarm for me. And that's what I just hate bullying, simple as. And I
And
was,
bullying is exactly what's happening. We're being bullied. Yeah.
and that's what triggered my red light. And I said, no, I'm not having this. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And like, I appreciate that you've reached out because mainstream media, they are completely compromised. They completely sold out. If we think the social contract, and they basically what I would say is wrong now in those days, is that
Mm.
the social contract has been broken because
Oh, completely.
media, they were meant to be guard dogs. They were meant to, we pay them to report on the government, to inform us, to work for us, to benefit us, but not to be, tube of propaganda. And they're just compromised. They're just gone. So we we now see, I mean, there is opportunity now to rewrite the media, rewrite all those models, all the conditioning. So that's like biggest thing that happened to me was breaking the conditioning, waking up to what is going on. And in that sense, I appreciate this pandemic because it just opened my eyes. Once you're waken up, you can't go asleep again. You can't
No,
pretend
no,
that you don't see what is going on.
that's very true. It's very
But
true.
now we need to challenge this. We need to think what it means to be human, what it means to constitute society. How can we restore or maybe rebuild
Well,
rebuild the society?
and we do. That's exactly what we need to do. As I said, the very first thing we must do is we must spend cash. That's the first thing. Like, if my advice to anybody immediate is do that. Stop using your card. Try and shop at shops. Try not to shop online, because whilst all these shops have closed down in the last 18 months, people have been forced online. This is what I was alluding to earlier. Everything's gone online. People have been shopping at Amazon. While they've been doing that, people like Jeff Bezos and his clique of friends have made trillions. I mean, they've made almost exactly the amount of money in profit in the last 18 months that the working man on the street has lost. It's almost directly proportional. What the common people, the working class people have lost, these elites have made. It's daylight robbery is what it is. They've shut down the shops, they've caused them to close, they've deliberately ruined people's lives. I mean, it's evil. This is when I said earlier on, it's evil. 500 million people around the world have lost their jobs and their livelihoods. They've been plunged into poverty. That is evil. You cannot do the two things at the same time. They do not marry together. You cannot shut down 500 million people's livelihoods, plunge 150 million people into abject poverty, close down the national health, destroy the education system, destroy the economy, and then saying, but we're looking after your health. That's a joke. That's insane. That's clearly, you know, these two things do not integrate. They do not go together. It's a lie. Everything we've been told in the last 18 months by our governments and by world leaders is a lie. They are lying to us. There was one other thing I did want to touch on, because I think it's extremely important. There's the ivermectin debate. Now, I don't know if I can say that word even, actually, but I want to mention the situation in, right, yeah, as she's saying, Sasha's talking about the cashless, you know, the progression towards cashless society in Uttar Pradesh, which is the northernmost part of India. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they have mounted the most successful campaign in the world against, yes, to isolate. I'll come to that in a moment, Neil. Against COVID. And do you know how they've done it? The government has handed out packs door to door, which contain ivermectin, doxycycline, is it, and zinc, and vitamin D3. These are the three most, salient ingredients in this pack that they've been giving out, and a form of an oximeter. I think it's called an oximeter. You know, to measure your the oxygen in your blood. They've done that, and these packs have cost approximately £2 or $2. They've done the whole thing very, very cheaply, because, as you know, ivermectin costs almost nothing. It's just pennies. But ivermectin absolutely works. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's been pushed, it's been sidelined, and its effectiveness has been suppressed the entire time, because, as I'm sure you know, Radek, if you have a drug on the market already which is known to be effective, then you can't introduce other drugs under emergency authorization. So anything else that would have worked has had to be completely sidelined and discredited. Like, I mean, Twitter recently went absolutely mental with this, with all people were taking horse paste and things. It's insane. It's been licensed for humans for years. They've been using it for decades to fight what are they called? Worms, you know, parasites and things like that in Africa. It's been available for human consumption for decades with a
Um,
proven.
I will I will maybe stop you on this because we know the story of the drug
Oh,
you're
okay,
mentioning.
okay.
But
Did
what I
you know
want
it was
to
being given out in Uttar Pradesh? Did you know about that? And did you
know,
know that their
I
COVID
mean,
cases are flatlined? There are no
no,
COVID cases.
the whole problem that we've got is that medical professionals they refuse the any treatment, and by any means you can't say that this disease was so dangerous to actually, to justify those measures. So lack of any treatment. So forget about individual substance, whatever substance we will use,
Okay.
injectable or some sorts of drugs that are tested or untested. There was no other alternative allowed, and I think that's the root of the whole problem,
Mm,
the suppression of discussion, the monopolization, the just like herding everybody to one direction. That's what seems to be a problem to me because I wouldn't mind taking treatment of any sort if I would need it. But
mm.
I still remember that, you don't take antibiotics unless you're sick.
Right.
You
Now
you don't
that,
take medicine. It was called in the old days being hypochondriac to
yes, yes,
to
absolutely.
pretend to pretend that you're unwell and you've got disease that you don't have. So we now see all this encouragement, like even if you're, all this propaganda. Literally in UK, you wouldn't walk or drive for 250 meters without seeing some visual message reminding you that there is emergency, that you need to get tested,
Yeah.
and various words that we can't mention because we'll be
Yes,
taken
sorry.
offline.
I'm sorry. I do apologize. But that is a really valid point. And that, with my background in nursing, one of the things that I learned was you don't take any medication unless you absolutely need it. And one of your very first questions to me this evening was, why was I suspicious? What was it that alerted me to what's going on? Well, it was this instant, like, assertion that we had to take this intervention. It was almost immediate. It was like, oh, we're going to have to be injected. All of us are going to have to be injected. That's going to have to be done. And I was just like, really? What? Why? Why would we have to do that? Why is that an absolute necessity from the very outset? You only take something if you absolutely need it. And the only people, as far as the narrative went in the very beginning, who were vulnerable to this illness, and is by and large actually strictly true, was those who were already approaching, and I don't mean to sound heartless when I say this, but already approaching the end of their life. People in their late 70s and 80s. The average age, I think, excuse me, is still about 80, 83. And who are the people that have paid the price for this over the last year and a half? It's people half that age, and it's children and teenagers. The FDA currently are now pushing for 5 to 11-year-olds to be, what would you say?
Treated.
Treated. That's it. To be treated. Yeah, they're pushing for that now. 5 to 11-year-olds. Fauci wants 6-month-old babies treated. That's on the cards. It's in the pipeline. These things are happening. This is moving fast, really fast. And it's as I say, it's really scary. However, I don't think it's as successful as they want us to think it is. There's a lot of things that they state, as fact. You read it in the media. This is a fact. This is happening. That's happening. That I don't think is a fact. I don't think as many people have actually stepped up to be treated as they say have. Actually, I don't think it's going quite as swimmingly as they would have us believe that it is. I think that's part of the psychological game that they're playing. They try to convince us that it's pointless to resist. It's pointless to resist because it's already so far advanced. Your resistance is futile. I don't believe that. And I don't think anyone out there should believe that either. You don't give up, because that old expression, what's that expression, while there's hope, while there's life, there's hope. And and there's not just life, there's strong life here. Strong life. There are very many strong individuals who are very strong-willed and very resistant to this, who are capable of standing firm in the face of it. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen people stand there unarmed, in the face of a barrage of people coming to them with all sorts of weapons and stuff like that, and just facing them down. And because this is a fight for the soul of humanity. This is about your God-given right to exist in this world as a free individual, as a sovereign soul. It is your right. That's how you were born. And nobody has the right to take that away from you. No other human being has the right to impose their will upon you any more than you have the right to impose your will upon them. We are sovereign beings, and we have our own soul and our own feelings, our own heart and mind and dreams, aspirations, everything. No one has the right to encroach on that and to change it. And what these people want to do is immoral and it is evil. They want to set up what ultimately will be a digital dictatorship, a biosecurity state in which you have no freedom whatsoever. And
Again,
what?
let me stop you on this because we're nearing 2 hours, and again,
Okay,
we might spend tens of thousands of hours pondering on
yeah,
others' agendas, but where we will go, I mean, where we want to go, like, what's your proposition? What's how we challenge this? What's the solution in your eyes?
okay. So first thing, spend cash. Second thing, you know, don't be swayed. Stick to what you feel inside. If you're agreeing with this conversation and get involved, go out on a protest. If you do go on a protest, though, peaceful protest. Always be peaceful. There's no need to engage in violence. That's really what we're being provoked into doing. And the moment you do that, you've lost the battle because we don't have arms in this country. We're not prepared to fight. So protest peacefully, like Gandhi, if you like. Um, Stay strong, try and spread the word, to your friends and your family, what's really going on. I would advise people to there's a few speakers out there who are really, really wonderful, people that are worth watching. There's UK Column who are on Facebook, and I know that an awful lot of people on Facebook already watch them. There's a guy I've been watching for a couple of years, James Corbett of the Corbett Report. Check him out. A wonderful woman by the name of Whitney Webb, who has a website called Unlimited Hangout. Check her out. She's extremely articulate, very well researched, wonderful lady. And then there's Ryan Christian, who has a site called The Last American Vagabond. Check these places out. They're really worth it. They're every time they do anything, everything's documented. There's nothing in it is just hearsay or anything like that, or conjecture or speculation. It is documented fact. They're all very good at that. Check them out. You're not alone. Don't think for a moment that you are alone. There's an awful lot of good people out there who are fighting your corner. Take heart, be strong, spend cash. Don't submit to any treatments. Watch people like you. If anybody wants to contact me, wants to talk to me, I'm happy to talk to people. I hope that we'll do this again, Radek, because I enjoy talking to you and I think it's a great platform. And hopefully I'll get better at it. I hope you'll appreciate this. The very first time I've ever done anything like this on a live stream, and so I wasn't quite as
When
organized.
we were chatting before we went live, it's like it all takes time, and we just have to do what we've got with the resources we've got,
Yeah,
and we will improve. Like nobody trained me to say do live streaming or do that type of thing. It's just like I engage, and that's my
yeah,
activism. That's yours, and we need to take it as a organized direction because the more people will do something, that's what I'm saying. Never underestimate power of a action of a one person because anything you do will have consequences. And the whole game, as you might agree with me, is psychological because they just want us to be confused, they want us to be fearful,
yeah.
and they want us to um, acknowledge the victory. But um, it's not over. There is more of us than is them, and they are just putting wool over our eyes.
And just remember that there are far more of us than there are of them. And and don't be afraid. You know, that was also a thing that really rang alarm bells with me right at the very beginning, was the whole way our government was approaching this. It was instantly that it was psychological warfare that they were using on their own people, and I didn't understand that for a moment. I thought, why are you doing this? This is not right. Normally in a time of crisis, your government comes out fighting for you and says, don't panic, we will prevail. That's normally what they do. That's what Churchill did. That's why the man is so revered 100 years after. He wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, before anybody attacks me for mentioning him. But his message was a positive one, and it was a unifying one. Conversely, our government in the last year, their message has been to, as I say, to polarize the public, and to split us up, and to get us fighting amongst ourselves. Almost every single narrative that's been put out in the last couple of years has done that, has achieved that. You know, whether it's the LGBT thing I alluded to earlier, or it could be critical race theory, or anything else. It's all designed to separate people and get us arguing amongst ourselves and to divide us. I believe Neil said something earlier, like divide and conquer. You know, that's been their policy. And fear all the time. And I just thought, this is not right. This is not the way a government should be ruling over its people. And a government that does that is not fit to rule over its people. They should be uniting us, pulling us together, and filling us with courage and strength, and they're not. So that role has now fallen to people like you and I. And so, yeah, my message is, don't be afraid, because as you quite rightly said, Radik, there are far more of us than there are of them, and we will prevail. All we have to do is hang in there, you know, and believe. Truth will out. Truth will always out. The truth prevails, you know, and it will prevail, and these people will be shown up for the criminals, actually, that they are, because they are criminals. There's no two ways about it. Okay, I get the feeling that we're heading towards a close now anyway, so thank you for allowing me to speak. I hope that I have raised some subjects and shed some light on some things that maybe that people weren't aware of already, and I hope that that's been of interest to them. And if we have an opportunity to do this again sometime, I'm on board for that. And I just, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I think it's really important. And you know, my love to everyone out there. I've read some really nice comments actually while we've been on air, so that's lovely.
Bear
And
in mind that we're completely suppressed. I'm not a big fan, or maybe I just did. I'm not saying fun, that's a wrong word. I never utilized the YouTube properly.
mm,
I've done one live stream on YouTube from recent protest at Trafalgar Square, and it was taken down within about 3 hours. I had like 4,800 views when I checked, and it was gone, blocked immediately. I don't know what will happen with this. I know that YouTube is a channel to be on for reach, but it's just that's one thing. I did something, but I didn't put this. I didn't give my 100% in it yet. Yeah, so I'm just changing my approach, because if we understand what the governments are doing around the world, if we understand that this is hidden war and we are the enemies and they are waging war on people,
mhm,
we need to understand and empower ourselves. And this won't be a short process. There's no going back to what
no,
we considered as normal. So for us, we will be now engaging in, I would say, decades of years of transformation. But I'd rather have transformation done our way, where we have consent and when we agree to new ways of life,
yeah,
rather than being forced, bullied, lied to, abused, like we are now. and I'm not best at being politically correct. I passionately hate politics because I consider them unaccountable and all this dirt washing and all that stuff. Um, I just don't resonate with this. I'm looking at like entrepreneurship, at business, personal development, psychology, philosophy. I'm looking on all those arts, and I know that people are capable of doing much better, and we are really not living to the humane potential. And we got all this circus only because we are run by idiots. But I think because they wanted to tighten the screw too much. They just rattle our cage that they waken up so many people to, so we actually can see the shackles of the system that they were creating. And like now, I think this is opportunity for us, not for them. They want us to. That's why I was diverting you all the time from their narrative because, okay, that's what they're doing,
Mm.
but it's none of my business. My business is my business, not theirs.
Mm.
So what I will be doing as a human being, what I will be doing as a father, as a business person, as a journalist, whatever, this is my concern. I'm not following their agenda, and I'm not
Well,
gonna
good
and
for
I'm
you.
gonna dwell. So what I want to engage with people and just live life on my own terms, and where we discuss and when we enhance each other. When we build future together using
What?
technology rather than just being tangled in that wrestling with certain individuals who got problems with their, I would say, their heads, um,
Yes, very much. Yeah,
most politely.
yeah,
And I'm pretty sure we can come out with something staggering, So, in a sense, that's why I want to divert from
yeah.
their agenda to back to people, because people like you, me, and everybody who I meet on those rallies, it's from each individual the change will happen. So
There
each
is a.
individual need to
Sorry.
own
Yeah.
their own action and be the change.
Yes, but that's very good, Rad. Be the change. Exactly. There is an old saying by somebody: "The best revenge is living well." And if you can carry on living your life without, yes, realize your potential and everything else like that, self-actualization, don't let them suppress you so much that you can't be who you are, and reach your full potential. I agree wholeheartedly. Live well. That's the best kind of revenge you can have at the moment, or reaction response to this. Don't let their narrative um force you into a corner and change who you are and change the way you live your life. Don't let them do it. Just still carry on being who you are, doing what you want to do, and living free. Be free, and be unafraid. um it doesn't matter what they throw at us. Carry on like that. That's the way forward. And yeah, as I say, great talking to you. Really positive stuff. Neil, anybody who said, I'd had a couple of people say, where do you find me? I've just got a Facebook page. That's about it. I don't really have much of a social media presence. So, but if you want to write to me on there, if anybody wants to contact me on Messenger or something like that, then more than happy to chat with people. But yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, hopefully we'll do this again, will we, sometime? And we'll go into more detail next time about things. But for tonight, Radik, unless there's anything else you want to add, or anything
No,
else?
no, that's good conclusion, and
Mm,
I I just want to bring more people in, and that's what we need because all what they do is to make us feel isolated.
yeah,
It's just a game, and they want us to feel bad about our choices, but I don't feel bad about my choices,
no, me neither.
and and the same. That's why we need to show people who are under this illusion, under this hypnosis. We need to show real people who, because that's what happened. That's like I would never thought that that's the blessing in disguise of this pandemic. I would never connect with so many um individuals thinking similar. I mean, how to say, brave people with similar values. I
Yes, do you
would,
know that's amazing irony you've just hit on there that you've just pointed out. It's just occurred to me. I kept talking about how they've tried to atomize us and break us down and destroy social cohesion, and yet it is their very attempts to do that which has brought so many of us together. And that's exactly what they don't want to happen, but it's exactly what is happening. It's exactly what you was alluding to just then. It is that very attempt to polarize and divide us that's actually uniting us right now against them. And that's a wonderful thing, as you're just saying. That is actually wonderful. It's wonderful to reach out and to connect with other people, like you say, with a common cause and a common feeling. And yeah, that's the best thing that's come out of this so far in the last 18 months is
I
that kind
wouldn't
of
do
sense.
it if I wouldn't believe in possibility of change.
Mm,
The truth of the matter is that we are facing historical shift, change,
absolutely,
but
yeah.
we got opportunity to participate in the process of historical change. So this is great thing,
Mm,
and for me this is positive aspect, and we together collectively we got all different outlook on the world, and we can mutually with agreement build something better than individuals doing it. Like this old acronym team together everyone achieves more. So we can enhance each other rather than just suppress each other and fall into that I would say atavistic ways, because this crave of power, this is something of an old man that needs to die off. This is something that we need to evolve from. This is like this old caveman that still wants to grab the power, and that's this old instinct. So this is opportunity, and this is dynamic process. So this is like football game. It isn't. It's never set till it's finished. The game will never be. It's like pulling the rope. It never ends their way or our ways. It will end in between, but it depends how strong each side pulls. So we need to engage. To give up game without fight is pointless. And I'm just not. That's I. Everybody got their own view of the world, and I feel that every single person can do well and do a lot in this process. So if we enhance consciousness of billions of people, millions of people, we'll have different society, different world. For now, we've got this technology, but it's not technology that's the problem, because technology in itself is neutral. It is the
mm,
same like knife. You can use knife to make a sandwich, or you can use knife to kill another human being, or to do some damage. So technology in itself is as well. It's double-edged sword, because now we're using very same technology that is used to manipulate us. So,
If I may just interject here again, Rad, your point is very right on. But as I say, my overriding message at the end of this has got to be spend cash, because the minute we go into that situation where we're cashless, then everything you're talking about will be moot. Because when we go cashless, they will control what we can spend and where we can spend it, and at that point, we're pretty fucked. I'm sorry to swear, but that's really, really a situation we don't want to find ourselves in. So everybody out there, please, please spend cash. Draw money out of your cash machine. Buy things with cash. Only cash. Don't use your credit cards anymore, because that's where they want us. And once they've got us, it doesn't matter how strong your will is. If you can't buy food, you're screwed. And that's where they will have us. That will be the next thing. We're facing the fuel shortages now. The food shortages are coming. And if we end up in a situation where we can't even buy food, we are really knackered, you know. So you've got to keep spending cash. We've got to resist this urge to go cashless, because once they do that, they will control. Remember, we was in a tier system a little while ago with the COVID and stuff like that. They are looking at now, and I'm not going to go on for long because I know we've reached the end of the conversation, but this is important. They are looking at now creating what they're calling smart cities, cities that are 15 minutes or 20 minutes in radius. Everything is within that radius, and you won't be able to escape it. Even if you try to get outside it, your card won't work outside that certain distance, be it 2 or 5 kilometers from your home. If we end up in that situation, we really are in trouble. And the first thing we need to do to prevent that from happening is spend cash. Don't use your cards. Always use cash. Obviously, don't get the treatment, and don't use your credit cards. We have to, if we can do that, if we can resist the treatment and we can resist the urge to use credit cards all the time, we are in with a good fighting chance, because that's a major spanner in the works of what they're planning for us. It really is a major obstacle. That will be the last thing I'll say tonight, because otherwise, you know what I'm like. I'm tired as well, but I will tend to, once I've onto something, I'll go forever. And I know you want to close, but I agree with everything you said. You're such a decent person. And that's why since the moment I met you, I liked you. And that's why I wanted to do this with you tonight, because I think you're a wonderful human being, compassionate, big hearted soul. And I love that about you. I just felt the urge, and I hope you don't mind, and I hope you're not angry with me, but I just felt the urge to just say that one last time, because I felt it deserves reiterating. Cash only. Don't get treated. Be strong. Don't be afraid. That's it. I'm over. I've said everything I have to say. So I'd say good night. I'm just going to say good night.
okay, great. So, like I said, we were on very limited hands because I was blocked on Facebook. That's where majority of people followed me. But I'm blocked for 18 more days, I believe. But it's about doing things correctly, small increments. So I'm planning to improve on social media. I want to be more independent from censorship. So I'm working on the website and again on being being less dependent on the actual platform itself, because I want to engage with people more. So that's not one's man job. It's a job for many people to connect. Then the more people will do something. That's why I see individual human beings as a key, because it's hard to change the whole lot. It's hard to change 7.5 billion, 7.9 billion people, but to reach to individuals and encourage them, get to their heads, connect with them, that's very doable. And I think this will be more viral than this particular bug that spread through
Yeah.
my mainstream media primarily and spread through minds, so we can spread certain ideas even faster. But we need to overcome this fear, and we need to empower individuals to start being more conscious and to live better. So that's why I want to engage with more people like yourself to, brainstorm and come with some solutions. And again, connect more because, we're humans. So we need to connect with humans and we need to, by conversation like this, we can get to each other's heads rather than being fed with their narrative and being set against each other because that's how we were ruled. That's how humanity was ruled
Yeah.
throughout all the history. Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
That's enough of this. We need to come with something else. So it's time now to discuss those ideas. And again, each individual can do something, and that change will resonate from each individual transformation. That's how I see the key to change this. Because otherwise, if you just think, okay, the situation would be looking like they're presenting, it would be overwhelming for us. But once we understand the key to change is within us, and then this empowers us. So we will do more of activity like this, more discussion, more real information, more non-politically correct discussions, let's say about atomic family, about humanity, and that's what we have to do to resist and not to fall in divide and conquer, like division between treated and untreated people, because it's so easy to get tangled. And I'm a human like you, and I'm easy to be wind up, but it won't make a change. What will make a change is working on ourselves and doing our bit to our best ability, yes, and not just one thing off, just living our lives, being consistent, and giving our best. So that's the key: personal development, and this will not end like they want, but it just takes engagement, and we need to expand consciousness of more people, and then we will have different outcome. Because at the minute, this is just a theater, big illusion, big, how to say, big trick.
Yeah. A hoax. It's a scam. It's a scam.
Yeah, so scamdemic will pass, but then there was so many other scams in the past. So it's time to grow up and just, rethink what it means to be human, rethink what society should be like, what accountability should be like, communication, our relations. We need to re educate ourselves. It will be difficult, it won't happen overnight, but I find this exciting, that we are taking part in this historical moment. It's better to be on the active side than just being, taken by the wave of history. So
Yeah.
each one of us needs to decide: do we want to take our part, or just being swiped by either side
Yeah.
by the sheer force of it? So that's what I want to leave you with. So Mandy, thank you for reaching out and for this interview.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
And all of you who watched, good night. Like I said, the views were limited. Once we come out of this block, I will we will reach wider audience, and as well going forward, I just want to work it out, work towards better presence, because we need new media, we need new informational outlet, we need new places of discussion. There's a place for everybody to engage.
Yeah.
So, let's get some work done. And thank you for watching. Good night.